She had been confined to a wheelchair for 2 years, with no hope of walking again, until a little girl of just 7 walked up and asked, with an innocent smile, "Can I help you walk again?" The woman, a skeptical millionaire, laughed at the naivete. But what happened next changed her life forever. The clacking of the laptop keys still echoed through the silent room when Amelia Reynolds shut the computer and let out a tired sigh. It was nearly midnight. Her return flight had landed late, but she decided not to tell anyone. She liked surprises, or maybe, deep down, she hoped to be surprised herself. The taxi pulled up in front of the imposing penthouse. Automatic gates, private security, a glass facade, a fortress, but inside the silence always shouted louder than any luxury. Amelia stepped in quietly, keeping the lights off. She knew every corner, every piece of furniture, every detail of that place. High heels in hand, heart racing, senses on alert, she climbed the stairs cautiously. At the bedroom hallway, muffled laughter reached her ears, a woman's laugh, and the unmistakable sound of intimate voices. She froze. The bedroom door was ajar. Warm yellow light spilled out in a merciless glow. Eyes wide, breath caught in her chest, she pushed the door open. Time stopped. Michael, her husband of 10 years, lay in bed with another woman. The same bed where they had made plans, negotiated deals, laughed and cried together. He looked at Amelia, his face frozen in shock, but said nothing. The other woman, mute, covered herself. Amelia, without a scream, without a single tear, simply turned away. She descended the stairs, with her dignity shattered, yet intact on the surface. In the kitchen, she took the first swig of whiskey straight from the bottle. Her hands trembled. Her phone rang insistently, but she didn't answer. Instead, she went to the office safe, a habit whenever she felt insecure. It was empty. Her mother's jewelry, the contracts, even her emergency fund were gone. Important documents, too. An envelope of bank statements caught her eye. She pulled it out and read, transfers to unknown accounts, unauthorized withdrawals, suspicious payments, all bearing Michael's electronic signature. Amelia felt the floor drop from beneath her. Hours later, still dazed, she went back upstairs. Michael was gone. The house was eerily silent. That's when she noticed the missing gold locket she'd kept since childhood and a diamond bracelet from her grandmother. Desperate, she began rifling through rooms. Realizing more items were gone, she made an impulsive decision. She called Margaret. "Where are my jewels?" Margaret, startled, answered calmly, "Mrs. Amelia, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't touched anything." "Don't lie to me, Margaret. You were the only one with access up here." Her voice cut like a knife, twisted by pain and fury. Margaret tried to explain, but Amelia wouldn't listen. In a reckless moment of despair, she ordered the woman who had cared for her like a mother for 15 years to leave the house immediately. Rain. It was the first sound Amelia heard that lonely night. Raindrops striking the windows like fingers trying to wake her from a nightmare. For days, she stayed silent. Her only companions were whiskey, the sofa, and the echoes of her own thoughts. Michael had vanished. The company was under audit. The press was circling. But nothing hurt more than that emptiness, the emptiness of trust betrayed, the emptiness of expelling the one person who had truly stood by her. Then came the night of the accident. Amelia drove aimlessly, with no destination, no hurry. City lights reflected in her tear-filled eyes. The radio played something distant. The clock hands had given up on marking time. The storm worsened. Lightning scarred the sky like wounds on furious skin. A misjudged curve, tires slipping, a scream that never escaped in time. The car spun into the air, struck the guardrail, and flipped twice before coming to rest on its side in overgrown brush. The screech of tearing metal, shattering glass, was followed by silence. Amelia no longer felt her legs, nor fear, nor the world. Everything went dark. The first sound Amelia heard when she woke was the intermittent beep of a heart monitor. The hospital's white ceiling felt farther away than it should, as if she were trapped in a body that no longer belonged to her. She tried to move her legs. Nothing. She tried again. The same void. Panic rose in her throat like a cold wave. The door opened, and the doctor walked in with the practiced calm of someone who's given this news before. "Mrs. Reynolds, you survived a very serious accident. There was an injury to your lower back, but—" He hesitated. "Your spinal cord wasn't completely severed." Amelia said nothing. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means there's a chance for recovery, but it won't depend only on physical therapy. It will depend on your will to fight." She closed her eyes. Fight. A word that had always come naturally, almost instinctively. But in that moment, it sounded like a foreign language. The image of Michael betraying her trust, the empty safe, Margaret's scream as she was thrown out, they all echoed like hungry ghosts in her mind. In the days that followed, Amelia refused visitors, ignored the therapist's instructions, and barely spoke to the nurses. When she was discharged, she chose to go back home. But the house was no longer the same. The marble floors gleamed coldly. The paintings on the walls felt meaningless. The stairs, now unreachable, stood as a cruel reminder of her new reality. She settled on the first floor, turning the living room into a bedroom, an office, and a prison. For months, she let only Charles, her driver and longest-serving employee, through the door. Even then, she treated him with indifference. "Would you like me to make you something to eat?" he asked kindly. "Just leave me alone." Charles fell silent. He watched her with quiet sorrow, but never pressed the issue. Amelia spent her days moving between the armchair, the makeshift bed, and the window, watching the world go on without her. On the quieter nights, flashbacks would storm in uninvited. Margaret laughing in the kitchen, rolling brigadeiros she swore were only for the building's kids, but always setting aside 2 extras for Amelia. The smell of corn cake on Sunday mornings. The sweet words, the scolding only a mother's love allows. "Amelia, you need to rest. You push yourself too hard." She also heard again Margaret's last words before leaving, suitcase in hand. "I never stole anything from you, only the affection you let me give." It was as if every memory knocked at her door to remind her of the woman she once was and the woman she was becoming. Time passed slowly. The seasons changed without her noticing. Charles kept the house in order, prepared meals she often left untouched, and tried, unsuccessfully, to get her back into physical therapy. Amelia didn't want to walk. She didn't want to get up. She didn't want to return. Once, Charles brought her a letter from an old college friend. She tore it up without reading. Another time, he tried to take her to the balcony to watch the sunset. Amelia pretended to sleep. No one knew her pain, or the weight she carried in her heart. 2 years went by like this, 2 years in which she looked in the mirror and saw only a shadow of her former self. The strong entrepreneur, the determined woman, the brilliant mind, all buried beneath the collapse that began with betrayal and ended in the accident. But contrary to her belief, something inside her still beat. A part of her, dormant, silent, but alive. And that invisible thread of hope, even if faint, would be what life used to pull her back to the surface. She just didn't know it yet. But soon, she would. The days no longer hurt as much as before, perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps from sheer habit. It was spring when Amelia began to leave the house, not by her own choice, but because Charles had insisted so much that she finally gave in. The park was only 2 blocks away, tucked away behind tall trees and winding gravel paths. It was a simple place, but its silence was different from that of her home. There, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, and distant conversations didn't suffocate her. It felt as if the world itself was breathing slowly there, and for a moment, she could breathe too. Amelia chose a fixed bench beside a small pond where the ducks always showed up at the same time. Escorted by Charles, she would sit there for an hour or two, staring without really seeing. Until one day, a little girl appeared. 7, maybe 8 years old, wearing a floral dress, curly hair, eyes too steady for someone so small. "Hi," she said naturally. Amelia merely nodded, hoping the child would move on. But she didn't. "Do you come here every day?" "That's none of your business," Amelia replied coldly. "My grandma used to say that when we keep walking the same path, it's because we're trying to remember something we've forgotten." Amelia frowned. What kind of child spoke like that? "What's your name?" the girl pressed. "Amelia." "I'm Abigail." The girl smiled, as if they'd just made a silent pact of friendship. She sat on the bench next to Amelia's wheelchair and swung her legs in the air. No ceremony, no hesitation. In the days that followed, Abigail began to appear there, always, even when Amelia arrived early, even when she switched benches, as if she knew exactly where to find her. And inevitably, they began to talk. Abigail asked questions that threw Amelia off balance. "Why don't you ever smile? Why do your eyes look so tired? Why do you never look up?" Amelia pretended not to hear, but she heard every word, and strangely, she found herself waiting for the girl. When Abigail missed a day, the park's silence felt crushing again. "Do you have any friends?" Abigail asked one sunny morning. "No more." "How sad. You seem like a nice person. You're just a little broken inside, you know." Amelia bit her lip to keep from snapping back. The girl didn't mean harm. It was as if she were simply stating a fact. "And why are you in that chair?" Amelia paused. "Because I had an accident." "Oh!" Abigail grew thoughtful. "But you're not trapped in it. You just forgot how to walk." Amelia turned her face sharply away. "Look, you're just a kid. You have no idea what you're talking about." Abigail said nothing. She just sat in silence. When she rose to leave, she smoothed her dress and said before she went, "My grandma used to say that sometimes the pain is so big, the body believes it can't go on. But it can. You just have to remember." Amelia didn't return to the park the next day, nor the day after that. But on the third day, she was there. And so was Abigail. "You came back," the girl said, smiling, almost as if she'd known. "Why do you always show up here?" "Because you need me." Amelia let out a bitter laugh. "And why would you think that?" Abigail looked into her eyes. Then, with a sweetness sharper than any accusation, she said, "Because my grandma said you were like a daughter to her. Her name was Margaret." Amelia froze. It felt as if the air vanished. The bench, the park, the whole world went silent for a moment. "What?" she breathed, her voice trembling. "Her name was Margaret Campbell. She was my grandma. She cared for you like you were family. She told me so many stories about you, even the one about the cake you burnt hiding in your teen years." Amelia was speechless. The memory of Margaret flooded back so vividly that tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. Her stomach churned. The past she had spent so long trying to bury was knocking at the door in the face of a child. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice thick. Abigail picked a fallen flower from the ground and placed it in Amelia's lap. "Because my grandma always believed you were meant for greater things. You just lost your way a bit." And then she smiled. A smile that carried more than childhood. It carried purpose. Amelia didn't know it yet, but in that moment, something inside her began to stir. "You're lying," Amelia said, her voice hard, her heart at war. Abigail wasn't startled. She just lowered her gaze, as if understanding that sometimes pain screams in denial. "I'm not. Margaret Campbell was my grandma. I lived with her. and she talked about you all the time, even after everything." Amelia clutched the arms of her wheelchair as if she could hold onto the world slipping through her fingers. It felt impossible. Impossible that this girl could know about the burnt cake, the pearl bracelet she'd given Margaret for her 60th birthday, the way Margaret called her "my brave girl." "Prove it," Amelia challenged, struggling to steady the voice threatening to break. Abigail reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in floral cloth. She handed it over gently. Amelia hesitated before unwrapping it. There in the palm of her hand lay the bracelet, slim, gold, with a tiny T charm. A custom piece Amelia had commissioned with the money from her first big contract. A simple keepsake, yet worth more than any diamond in her collection. The shock felt like a punch to her chest. Memories flooded back. Margaret's tears of joy as she opened the little box, her tight hug. And then the unjust accusation, the hasty packing, the door slammed shut. Amelia pushed her chair back, distancing herself from Abigail as if the girl carried a mirror reflecting everything she'd tried to forget. "Leave me alone." Abigail didn't argue. She only nodded sadly and walked away. Amelia returned home in complete silence. Charles noticed something different in her eyes, but didn't dare ask. For hours, she sat in her office, motionless, staring at the bracelet on her desk. Late that night, driven by something she couldn't name, she began rifling through drawers, folders, and old files. She searched until she reached the back of both her memory and the closet. That's when she found a crumpled old envelope among the company documents. Inside was a pawn receipt. Name, Michael Reynolds. Date, 2 days before the accident. Amelia's eyes trembled over the paper, as if reading in a foreign tongue. The jewelry, the very pieces she had accused Margaret of stealing, handed over by Michael at a pawn shop downtown. Her hand shook, her chest hurt. She could barely breathe. She screamed, a dry, hoarse-choked scream, not of anger but of guilt, a guilt that ate at her from the inside like acid on the soul. The truth was clear, harsh, undeniable. Margaret had been innocent, and she'd destroyed her. Amelia wept like she hadn't since the accident. She cried until her body was exhausted, until her eyes were dry, until all that remained was silence. The next morning she returned to the park. Abigail was already there, sitting on the same bench. She said nothing as Amelia approached, only waited. "It was all true," Amelia whispered, sitting beside the girl. "I was the one who destroyed her. I killed the best part of me." Abigail looked at her with tender firmness. "You can still make it right," Amelia shook her head. "I don't even know where to start." "I do." The girl stood and held out her hand. "Come with me." Amelia followed her to the far side of the park, where she'd never ventured before. A low stone wall separated the main path from a small alcove with short benches, potted plants, and at the back, a colorful mural of children's drawings. There, among paper flowers, hand-painted hearts and names scrawled in chalk, was a phrase in trembling red paint. "I still love you, my daughter of the heart." Amelia brought her hands to her mouth, tears welling again. "Did she write this?" she whispered. Abigail nodded. "My grandma came here every month. She said it was the only place she felt she could talk to you, even without an answer." Amelia traced the words with her fingertips, as if caressing a living memory. The warmth of those painted letters seemed to pulse through the wall, bridging decades, scars, and silences. Standing before that mural, Amelia didn't feel paralyzed. For the first time in years, she felt alive. The park was no longer just a silent refuge. It had become an arena of transformation, and Abigail, the little guide with eyes of ancient wisdom, had become more than a constant presence. She was the spark Amelia didn't know she needed. "Today we're going to play a game," the girl said on a clear morning, holding 2 pieces of colorful ribbon. Amelia raised an eyebrow, skeptical. A game? Yes. Follow me game. You have to copy everything I do. Only with your body. Abigail, I'm in a wheelchair. I know, but not everything needs legs. Abigail tied one ribbon around Amelia's arm and the other around her own wrist. She began with simple movements, lifting an arm, rotating a wrist, clapping hands. At first, Amelia just watched, but slowly she started to mimic. Now wiggle your toes, Abigail said with a smile. Amelia closed her eyes. She tried. She felt nothing. She tried again. 1, 2, 3 times, until a faint tingling surfaced, so subtle it could have been her imagination. I felt something. I don't know what. Abigail didn't cheer like a child. She simply smiled knowingly. That's how it begins. In the days that followed, the exercises became routine. Abigail brought ribbons, stones, leaves. She turned everything into playful drills requiring movement, focus, and concentration. And Amelia, who had once refused to try, now looked forward to their sessions. But inside her, a storm of emotions still raged. Guilt, like an anchor, dragged her down. She tried to find Margaret. She called old neighbors, sifted through outdated records, searched social media. Nothing. Her helplessness grew, looming like a shadow over the timid steps she was beginning to take, not with her feet, but with her heart. One overcast afternoon, she decided to confront Charles. You knew, didn't you? He, as always, paused his work calmly. He leaned against the doorframe and didn't feign surprise. I knew. From the start. I saw Michael go into the office before the accident, saw him at the safe, saw him leave with a folder. But you were so out of your mind, Amelia. You wouldn't have listened. I tried. God knows I tried. Amelia felt her throat dry. And yet you stayed? Because you were more than an employer, and because I owed it to Margaret. She asked me not to abandon you. She said you'd come back, that one day you'd understand everything. Amelia broke down. She cried with the kind of sobs a child might make, those soul-deep sobs born from something broken inside and never mended. I destroyed everything, Charles. I took from her what meant most, her dignity, and now she could be anywhere, angry, in pain. Charles stepped closer and took her hand. Margaret never hated you. She only missed you. Later, in the park, Amelia was unusually quiet. Abigail noticed. Aren't we playing today? She asked. Today. I don't think I can play. That's okay. Sometimes you just need to feel. Amelia looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, I tried to find your grandma, but I couldn't. Abigail nodded. She always said the right day would come, and until then, you needed to remember what it felt like to be loved. Amelia couldn't hold back her tears this time. She let them fall freely. I hate myself, Abigail. The girl knelt beside the wheelchair and took Amelia's hands. To walk again, you first have to forgive yourself. Your body only follows when your heart lets it. Those words were like a beam of light in a dark tunnel, simple, direct, but heavy enough to pierce every emotional armor Amelia had built. Something finally gave way. It wasn't in her legs. It was in her chest. And when she closed her eyes that day, for the first time in 2 years, she felt a small flame within her that didn't burn with pain, but with possibility. The sun hadn't fully risen when Charles pulled the car up to the entrance of the small village. Are you sure you're ready? He asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Amelia didn't answer right away. She stared out the window, her eyes fixed on the simple wooden gate ahead. A dog lay sleeping lazily on the sidewalk, and wildflowers sprouted between the cracks in the wall. It was all so different from the cold sophistication of her old home, and yet oddly welcoming. "I'll never be ready, but I have to be," she finally murmured. Charles stepped out, opened the side door, and helped Amelia into position in her wheelchair. She took a deep breath, as if bracing to face a mirror that reflected more than just her image. The wheels of her chair creaked softly as they rolled through the modest garden. The scent of fresh-baked bread drifted from the kitchen, mingled with the light perfume of lavender. Then the door opened. There stood Margaret. Thinner now, her hair completely white, but with the same eyes, kind, deep, and full of life. For a second, time froze. Amelia felt her throat tighten. She thought of all the right words, the apologies she had rehearsed in silence for weeks. But nothing came out. Margaret didn't wait. She opened her arms, tears glistening in her eyes, and said, "My dear girl, you've come back." Amelia collapsed into tears, her shoulders shaking as the weight of guilt pressed on every unspoken word. "Please forgive me," she managed to choke out. "I was blind, so unfair. I hurt you. I don't even know if I deserve your forgiveness." Margaret knelt before her, cupping Amelia's face in her hands, just as she had when Amelia was a frightened young woman. "I never hated you, Amelia. I only missed you." The embrace that followed was one of healing, relief, and reconnection. Amelia melted into the arms that had once comforted her so many times. In that touch, she found everything she had lost and was now finding again unconditional love, affection without judgment. Abigail, leaning against the doorway, watched in silence. Her eyes sparkled as though she were witnessing a miracle she always knew would happen. When Amelia looked at her, something kindled inside her, not just gratitude, but strength. Margaret led them inside, and the three spent hours together. They spoke little. Here, silence was not awkward. It was home. Margaret told how she had learned of the accident days after it happened. She thought about coming straight away, but decided to wait. She felt Amelia needed to face her own ghosts before she could open the door for anyone. "I always knew you'd come back at the right time," she said, smiling with infinite tenderness, "and that Abigail would lead you here." "She is different," Amelia said, looking at the girl with awe. "She is. Since she was little, she feels things before anyone else, sees what nobody else sees, as if she speaks straight to the heart, no words needed." Amelia spent the afternoon with them, laughing, crying, listening to stories, recalling secrets. And at day's end, when the sun set behind the mountains and golden light filled the little room, something shifted inside her. It wasn't physical, but it was powerful. She didn't just want to live, she wanted to fight. For herself, for the little girl still inside her, for the woman who had unfairly driven away the only mother figure she'd ever had, and for those like her who once lost their way but could still find it again. The first day of physical therapy took place on Margaret's living room rug. No expensive equipment, no renowned professionals, just a simple mat, 2 pillows, and 2 hands holding Amelia with both strength and tenderness, Margaret's hands, while Abigail barked out instructions like a pint-sized coach. "And now try to lift that foot just a little, just a smidge. See, it doesn't have to be much." Amelia laughed nervously. "I'm not sure if I'm actually moving it, or if I just really want to believe I am." Abigail leaned in, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "If you want it badly enough, that's already half the battle." The sessions became daily, sometimes in the park, sometimes at home, sometimes focused on physical exercises, other times on deep conversations, and often in moments of necessary silence. Progress wasn't linear. There were good days and frustrating ones. But one thing remained constant. Amelia was no longer alone. She cried, a lot. She cried in Margaret's arms, cried as she reread old journals, cried when she looked in the mirror and saw a woman stripped of her masks, finally vulnerable. On a rainy afternoon, she wrote the first of many letters to herself. "Dear Amelia, you failed, and that's okay. You lost, and that's okay. You were unfair, harsh, blind. But you were also strong, and now it's time to come back." She tucked the letter into a box. She went on writing more, to Margaret, to Michael, to her mother, who had passed away, but most importantly, to the little girl she once was, the one who dreamed of changing the world before it hurt her. It was during this time that Amelia made radical decisions. She donated the penthouse. She sent the remaining jewelry to an organization that supports women starting over. She resigned from her company, making clear she no longer wanted to be part of a culture that prized ambition over humanity. She left everything behind, except what truly mattered. In the little village where Margaret lived, she rented a modest house with open doors and windows that framed the trees. There, she learned to relearn. And then, on a morning that felt like any other, something extraordinary happened. "Try again, Amelia," Abigail said, taking her hand. "We're here." Amelia drew a deep breath. Margaret's hands steadied her waist, anchored her like roots. She focused, called on every muscle memory, every emotion stored in her bones. Her whole body shook, but with determination she felt her feet press down on the floor with new resolve. "Go," Margaret whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. And then Amelia stood up. Not all at once, not gracefully, but with soul. She was standing. Her legs wobbled, her heart pounded, her mind brimmed with astonished gratitude. Abigail wept, grinning through her tears. Amelia looked around. There was no crowd, no cameras, just the three of them. Yet that moment meant more than any award or applause. Taking short steps, still supported, she walked 1, 2, 3. And then she collapsed into Margaret's arms, laughing and crying like a child finally finding her way home. "You did it!" Abigail shouted. Amelia didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes and let the sunlight kiss her face. In that instant she knew she had forgiven herself. And because of that, she could walk. The auditorium was packed, people of all ages from different places, some in wheelchairs, others with invisible scars in their eyes. But all of them gathered for something greater than curiosity: hope. On the stage stood a simple microphone. A chair sat beside it, just in case. But Amelia chose not to use it. She wore white, her hair loose on her shoulders, and though her steps were slow, they carried a firmness beyond the physical. Soft applause accompanied her to center stage. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but warm. "I'm Amelia Reynolds, and for a long time, I believed that name was synonymous with success." She paused, scanning the audience. "But the success I knew was built on material gains, status, results, and loneliness. I was the woman who built a company from scratch, who lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, who controlled everything except her own life. The silence was absolute. Until the ground disappeared beneath me, first I discovered the betrayal of the man I loved, then I destroyed the life of the person who loved me most, and finally I lost control of the car and of my legs. I thought life had ended right there." Another pause. Tears glinted in her eyes, but she held the gaze of her listeners. But then a little girl appeared, a child with eyes deeper than those of many adults I'd met. She didn't heal me with medicine. She taught me to forgive myself, and in doing so, my body began to obey again. Amelia shared her journey, the reunion with Margaret, the letters, the donations, the first step. The truth is, the miracle didn't happen in a hospital. It started in the heart. And every step I take today is the result of forgiveness, reconciliation, and love. The love I received from the person I least expected and who gave me the most. The audience was moved. Many wept. Others closed their eyes as if to feel each word more deeply. That's why I'm here tonight, to launch the Abigail Margaret Institute, A place that will be not only a center for physical rehabilitation, but for emotional healing as well. Because I've learned that forgiveness is the greatest treatment there is. The talk was recorded on dozens of cell phones and went viral that very night. Amelia became a symbol, not of shallow overcoming, but of profound transformation. She wasn't just a businesswoman who learned to walk again. She was a woman who had learned to walk from the inside out. A few days later, Amelia decided to visit her old company. The reception in the lobby was tense. Curious eyes followed her. Some of her former colleagues stood uncertainly, but she was calm. She was welcomed into the boardroom by directors, among them those who had distanced themselves during the Michael scandal. Amelia showed no resentment. "I'm not here to point fingers," she said firmly. "I'm here to propose a partnership." She presented the Institute's plan, requesting support for full scholarships, clinical partnerships, and a social responsibility program involving employees as volunteers. The response was unanimous. Yes. Before leaving, she passed by the office that used to be hers. She lightly touched the doorknob, gave a small, knowing smile, and walked on. But there was one last visit to make. Michael. He now lived in a modest apartment, ill, penniless, with no allies. When he opened the door and saw Amelia, his shock was obvious. "What are you doing here?" he stammered. "To close a chapter." He braced for accusations, for bitterness, but she offered none. "You hurt me. You betrayed me. You destroyed much of who I was, but you also freed me from a life that wasn't mine anymore." Michael looked down, ashamed. Amelia continued, "I came to tell you I forgive you, and I hope you find your own chance to start over." There was no hug, no grand farewell, just silence between two people who, at last, accepted that the past needn't be a prison. That night, back at home, Amelia walked out into her garden, alone. She looked up at the clear sky, took a deep breath, and smiled. Because miracles happen when love finds the courage to try again. The big day had arrived. The lights were on, panels in place, chairs arranged in a semicircle, yet it wasn't an ordinary launch. There was no red carpet, no flashes, no stiff speeches. The inauguration of the Abigail Margaret Institute was all about fresh starts, and every corner of the space breathed welcome. The center didn't have a single headquarters. It was a project with branches across regions, partner clinics, community spaces, adapted hospitals, a network of care born from a simple idea: healing must be holistic. Physical therapy with compassion, psychology with genuine listening, art as a tool for reconstruction, children as bridges of empathy. The Institute's name sprang from two deep roots: Abigail, the child who ignited the spark of transformation, and Margaret, the woman who never stopped loving, even when she was cast out of the heart of the one she loved most. At the opening ceremony, Amelia walked onto the stage unaided. Each step was a living declaration of what the Institute stood for. At her side stood Margaret. In the front row, amid smiles and flowers, sat Abigail, in a yellow dress, her eyes shining with their own inner light. "Today, we're not just inaugurating a place," Amelia began. "We're celebrating an idea, that no one is too broken to be rebuilt, that no one is too alone to be reached." Soft applause filled the room. "I learned that some pains can paralyze the body, but it was love that taught me to walk again. Love that came from a woman who never gave up on me, and from a child who never judged me." She turned to Abigail. "This is my first tribute to the girl who saw me when I could see nothing, who believed when I had already given up. Abigail, this place is yours too." Abigail stood, shy but smiling, as she received a necklace bearing a small anchor, a symbol of the Little Angels program, where children like her would serve as emotional mentors to adults in rehabilitation. After the ceremony, Amelia accepted embraces, heard stories, and felt the warmth of a new purpose pulsing all around her. But by late afternoon, something strange happened. Abigail had disappeared. Amelia searched the entire hall, questioned guests. No one had seen her leave. Margaret, calm as ever, found her by the garden. "You're looking for her, aren't you?" she asked. Amelia, anxious, nodded. Margaret smiled serenely. "She came here for one reason only." "What do you mean?" "Abigail has always been more than she appears. From the start, she seemed to know more than anyone else, as if she carried a mission within her. And now that it's complete, she's moving on." "Moving on to where?" Margaret said nothing. She took Amelia's hand and guided her to one of the Institute's panels, a tribute wall. There, among clippings, photos, and inspirational quotes, lay a small letter. Amelia read it in silence. "Amelia, you have healed. Now it's your turn to heal the world. I'll be nearby whenever your heart calls. With love, Abigail." Tears came easily, not of sadness but of recognition, of something beyond logic or explanation, as if Abigail were a bridge between heaven and earth, between yesterday and tomorrow. Margaret whispered, eyes shining, "True healing begins in the heart." Amelia looked around. She felt whole. She felt at home. There, in the Institute, born of pain, love, and second chances, a new story was beginning, and this time it wouldn't belong to her alone. It would belong to all who once forgot how to walk, and now would have someone to remind them. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.